Have you ever wondered about the psychological aftermath of war on the survivors? War, a phenomenon as old as history itself, has profound and far-reaching impacts that extend beyond the battlefield. It's easy to see the physical destruction, the ruined buildings, the displaced people, the wounded soldiers. But what about the unseen scars? The damage that doesn't show on the surface but lingers in the minds of those who have lived through the horrors of conflict. Today we delve into this less explored territory, shedding light on the psychological toll war takes on its survivors. We're not here to inundate you with statistics and data. Instead, we're focusing on individual stories, personal experiences that underline the human cost of war. Because after all, behind every statistic is a person, a story, a life altered by the harsh realities of war. War survivors often grapple with a multitude of psychological disorders. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is perhaps the most well-known. It's a debilitating condition that can make a person relive their traumatic experiences through nightmares and flashbacks, leading to severe anxiety and disrupting daily life. Depression, a deep sense of sadness and loss of interest in life, is another common aftermath. It's not just about feeling down or blue, it's a persistent feeling of hopelessness, a darkness that can engulf a person's life. And then there's anxiety, a constant sense of dread, a feeling of being on edge all the time. It can be so overwhelming that it interferes with a person's ability to function normally. These are just a few examples of the psychological scars inflicted by war. Each survivor carries their own unique burden, their own set of unseen scars. Scars that might not be visible to the naked eye, but are just as real, just as painful as any physical wound. War leaves indelible marks on the minds of survivors, marks that are often overlooked. As we navigate through these stories, let's remember to look beyond the visible and acknowledge the unseen scars of war. Consider John, a decorated soldier who served in a fierce conflict. His courage under fire earned him medals and commendations, but the battlefield also left him with invisible wounds that proved far more challenging to heal. John, like many veterans, carried the war home with him. His nights were haunted by nightmares of the battles he fought and the comrades he lost. The echoes of gunfire and the cries of the fallen followed him into his waking hours, causing sudden and debilitating flashbacks. These weren't just memories, they were vivid, visceral experiences that gripped him with the same terror he felt on the front lines. Post-war, John's world became a battleground of a different kind. He found himself wrestling with a profound sense of isolation. The camaraderie of his unit was replaced with the solitude of civilian life, and the understanding nods of his fellow soldiers gave way to the puzzled looks of those who couldn't comprehend what he had been through. This isolation permeated every aspect of his life. Relationships that once brought him joy became strained. His friends and family struggled to understand the change in him, and John, in turn, struggled to articulate his experiences. His job, once a source of pride and stability, became an exercise in frustration as he battled the persistent intrusion of his wartime memories. John's story is not an isolated one. It's a tale echoed in the lives of countless war survivors who grapple daily with the psychological aftermath of their service. They navigate a world that feels both familiar and alien, forever marked by experiences most people can't fully comprehend. But it's also a story of resilience. Despite the challenges he faced, John sought help, reaching out to mental health professionals who specialized in trauma. Through therapy, he began to understand his experiences, learning to cope with his symptoms and to reconnect with his loved ones. John's experiences echo the untold stories of countless other war survivors. They remind us of the unseen scars carried by those who serve and the ongoing battle they face long after the gunfire has ceased. Now let's turn our attention to Maria, a civilian whose life was upended by war. Maria was an ordinary woman living an ordinary life until the day her world was shattered by the outbreak of conflict. Her home, once a sanctuary of love and laughter, became a battleground, her daily life punctuated by the deafening roars of gunfire and the terrifying whine of incoming artillery. The trauma Maria experienced during these harrowing times was profound and long-lasting. She was not a soldier, she did not wield a weapon, but the war found her all the same. It left her with scars that were unseen but no less real. Every day was a struggle for survival. Every night was a battle against fear. The constant threat of violence, the insecurity of not knowing if she'd see another dawn, the loss of friends and loved ones. All these experiences left Maria grappling with a psychological burden that was immense. As the war finally came to an end, Maria found herself in a world that was dramatically changed. But the end of the war did not mean the end of her struggles. She was haunted by survivors' guilt, tormented by the question of why she survived when so many others didn't. She was plagued by fear and anxiety, the sounds of war echoing in her mind, triggering panic at the slightest provocation. The impact on her mental health was severe. Sleep became elusive, joy became a distant memory, and the world around her became a place of constant threat. Her overall well-being suffered, her spirit was bruised and battered, but still, she persevered. Maria's story is not unique. Countless civilians, caught in the crossfire of conflict, face similar struggles. They bear the psychological scars of war, the trauma that extends far beyond the battlefield and persists long after the last shot is fired. Maria's story is a stark reminder of the unseen psychological toll of war on civilians. Understanding the psychological aftermath of war is the first step towards healing. Recognizing the profound impact of war on the human mind, we must emphasize the necessity of psychological support for survivors. This aid can take many forms, adapting to individual needs and circumstances. One such approach is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which aims to help individuals understand and cope with their traumatic experiences. Another is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, a unique method that uses directed eye movements to aid in processing traumatic memories. But professional interventions alone are not enough. As a society, we must foster an environment of understanding and empathy. We must acknowledge the unseen scars carried by war survivors and provide them the space to heal. As we bear witness to these stories, let us remember that the scars of war run deep, and the journey to healing is long and arduous.